Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today is the 1st of June, 2022. Just for that clarification because of news, sometimes it takes a little while to report certain factors. So just for that clarification, to make sure that there's that understanding. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to my official YouTube channel and make sure to like my official YouTube videos. In conjunction to that, if you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect and go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. So today being the 1st of June, 2022, as I showed you on an electronic device, for some of those individuals who are a bit too attached sometimes to technology pieces, there's the difference. So just to show you real quick, here's the 1st of June, 2022. And so, without further ado, so as I have been working on my Medal of Honor art project, taking a break in reference to doing something a little bit different because of the connected portions as to my Medal of Honor art project, while additionally updating my website, journal, blog, the Ornery PSA, as well as authoring more books, such as what you can find on my website, www.susanmealing.com. For example, I added a few books to 2 different series of my book series in the fiction genre for that clarification in the time frame since my transfer finally had occurred, and in conjunction to the aspects of all that traveling that I have done by myself in comparison to any actual assistance that would be beneficial to me in regards of any of my work, as well as the Dr. Mary Edwards Walker collection in association to my Medal of Honor art project. In addition to that, I've also gone out to the New Jersey area where I got to see from a location that I would recognize the evening skyline of the New York City skyline, and working on that because with the updates as to my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, since the year of 2019 to this year of 2022, I've had to make sure that all of these details that have been needing to be clarified and verified before, in addition to that particular work in regards of the attacks on the 11th of September 2001, I have needed to do quite a bit of work. And since I haven't had the luxury that other people have had, such as, well, anything in comparison to what most people have had in person, face-to-face, in person, as to those assistive aspects, that's been as it's been. And so in regards of the work that I've been doing, while it would be fantastic to actually have that as to what would actually be assistive, I also have known to rely on myself. For example, I earned 26 scuba diving certifications on my own. And so if in that hypothetical that those civilian recreational scuba diver types figured that they would view that in that capacity in comparison to practicing what they preach, because in civilian recreational scuba diving, in regards of either PADI and or NAUI, the teaching is that you're supposed to have a partner in regards of, because the only way you scuba dive is in person in the water, face-to-face in person. So since those individuals have failed to practice what they preach in regards of the way those civilian recreational scuba divers have instructed, I suppose maybe that's because they use the word instruction in comparison to teach. So maybe there's the loss of translation for that misunderstanding regarding that, because of maybe the references as to having earned 26 scuba diving certifications while not being in a relationship with another scuba diver. And so in that particular factor, where I haven't had that in any certification that I personally earned out of the 26 scuba diving certifications that I earned, maybe it's one of those versions of an MK Ultra situation. I don't want to assume because of that. And while I have acknowledged that I earned my 26 scuba diving certifications on my own, I have given the credit in regards of certain instructors as to which particular aspects that I had earned my 26 scuba diving certifications from, in the comparison as to the way other people, whether biological female at birth or biological male or what have you, as to how they earned their scuba diving certifications. So in those particular references, similarly to how there wasn't anybody who assisted to check my scuba dive gear that would be in a correct way, that would be positive and beneficial for me in those references at any point in time during any one of my classes for any of my 26 scuba diving certifications. You can look at the adventures of Susan Mi-Ling, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire. The books are available on my website, www.susanmiling.com, which is the same as www.ladydoribell.com, in reference to those particular books that can be purchased through Amazon. And the proof as to those factors, as to how there has not ever been anybody in person, face-to-face, in person with me, that would actually be beneficial to actually assist me in the correct ways, would be as simple as security cameras. Because without that in-person, face-to-face, in-person, in regards of no further than 1 arm distance away, obviously there hasn't been that over the several years. Actually, it's over a decade at this point in time, from the year 2009, because this is the year of 2022. And as it's been pointed out to me, how I'm not a scuba dive instructor, even though I earned 26 scuba diving certifications, none of those civilian recreational scuba diver instructors that I've ever known have actually ever done anything in the capacity of that would be considered in that reference to what those individuals have claimed are important in their teachings or instructions. And so since those individuals have repeatedly failed to actually be in line with what those people have instructed over the decade and almost decade and a half, that's the facts in regards of how there hasn't ever been anything that would actually, in my standards or even in the standards as to the civilian recreational scuba diving or any type of scuba diving, with the exception of SSI, as to how that actually goes. Though I very much do understand why there's SSI scuba diving, because with that many situations, just in reference to the 26 scuba diving certifications that I earned on my own, well, there are those facts that each and every scuba diving certification that I earned on my own, where nobody else paid for that, I paid for that out of my bank account in comparison. So where it would have actually be beneficial for me to actually have certain things in comparison to those civilian recreational scuba divers, in that similarity as to how none of them ever did anything that would actually be beneficial in the capacities of ever actually asking me specifically what I would need, because that requires actually having a discussion in person, face to face in person with me, where they actually have the common sense to actually ask me what I would need, because that's how discussion goes in those references. Because unlike any other individual as to the normalcy, with the exception of males, of course, because males, especially in the year of 2009, were usually the only individuals who had went to any certification course, such as I had earned, National Geographic Open Water, on their own. I'm going to guesstimate that probably 85%, if not more, of scuba diving certifications as to the open water, the individuals were with a relationship in the classroom. The other individuals in those classrooms, as far as the scuba diving certification classes for whatever version of open water, they may or may not have had a relationship outside of scuba diving, but the in the classroom is the important part regarding that. So since that was not in the classroom in regards to any scuba diving certification that I earned, similarly to how situations outside, well, see, that's kind of the important factor, that hypothetically other people might have thought that would be acceptable in comparison to what actually would be considered as acceptable. And any individual that has or has earned the instructor aspects should be capable to have some sort of reference point to where in their instructions that they teach people and instruct people that the only way that you do a version of just the basic open water is in person, face to face in person, in comparison to any hypothetical of. And so in those particular references, since I have had the Farmer John scuba dive gear wetsuit, where I went really deep into the oceanic waters, I'm going to make a joke, though not in a negative way, regarding Johnny Depp to Amber Heard, which I will tie that together as to when I got pregnant with my daughter. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, for those who know, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. And I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain that lasted 8.5 years, literally less than, I don't think it's even 4 months before the time I began my scuba diving for the first certification I earned, as to how the MRI and CAT scan didn't pick up any of the remnants to that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. So in the year of 2001, only 1.5, well, I don't know if it's even 1.5 years, might be 1 and 3 months, or 1 year and 3 months from the time that I woke up from my coma that I had delivered my son, and it would probably be something like 2 years and 3 months from the time that I delivered my daughter, from the time frame I woke up from my coma after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 during basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which in this particular reference as to the Amber Heard portion, when having been in Oklahoma, which is where the situations occurred as to how I got pregnant with my daughter, and those particular factors. Now, there are those in the state of Texas in regards to the year 2019. And those particular individuals would be capable to confirm one way or another as to whether or not I had even so much as masturbated in their house. that would be my ex-brother-in-law's house in comparison to individuals that I had considered in the particular reference. And so those individuals would be capable to clarify whether or not I personally had the sensation of comfort to do so, and in turn would be capable to clarify and verify regarding the Amber Heard situation if she had made attempts to tell her younger sister and or her mom and or her stepfather for that reference point as to how I got pregnant with my daughter in a conjunctive aspect for my other ex-in-laws to accept the fact as to how that actually went in conjunction for my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, as well as all their whatever connections, to take that in consideration as to the reality, aside from the fact that they had been informed in person, face-to-face in person, in regards of my dead ex-husband when he was alive, having actually informed them in person to their faces as to how that actually occurred. So while I have discussed this since then and then put it in writing, such as Finding a Silver Lining, regarding my first book that I had published out of 8 total, though 9 in regards of one other aspect as to copyrights, you can go to my website, www.susanmealing.com, which is the same as www.ladydoribell.com, and look through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, as well for those clarifications as to those situations during those times. And I did the best, especially in the beginning portion of the year 2019 when I began my updates, which was around October or so of 2019, into the year 2020 and 2021 to this year 2022. And I acknowledge, because of all of the stuff that I was dealing with yet again on my own by myself, because it wasn't as though there was ever anybody in person, face-to-face in person, that actually was assistive in any capacity of that would actually have benefited in any capacity for my work or anything I was working on because of the facts. And so if in that regards, as to Amber Heard, I suppose pun intended, in regards to my Farmer John wetsuit where I went deep, she also might have heard certain other factors, such as in the time frame of August 2009, when Tony Walker Nichols had contacted me after the phone calls from my 2 ex-sisters-in-law that he's related to, as to other situations, hypothetically. And or there could have been other nieces and nephews that heard those discussions. And since certain nieces and nephews of mine have known that, unlike certain factors, I've done the best that I actually could because of making sure as best as possible to do everything, again, on my own, because it's not as though I ever had anybody in person, face-to-face in person with me to do anything that would actually be to quite a few situations. For example, when my daughter was hospitalized the first time in the acute care center, I had to drive, and go Google this for the distance. I had to drive from Carrollton, Texas to Denton, Texas, and back to Carrollton, Texas during the daytime in the weeks to go to appointments while my son was in school. Then my ex-in-laws, again, look into the Google portions as to the amount of distance that I personally drove. So when my ex-in-laws, I had told them my daughter was in the hospital, so on and so forth. This is before the Fort Worth Zoo, by the way, because it's the year of 2009 for this reference. I drove, go and Google the distance, and then remember, I had to be there by 7 p.m. 1900. So think about the actual traffic and what time I had to leave to be there on time. So I had to leave from Carrollton, Texas, to drive to Fort Worth, Texas, to then drive to White Settlement, Texas, to then drive to Denton, Texas, because those ex-in-laws of mine were so lazy as to their particular aspects of, and then I had to drive from Denton, Texas. Mind you, my son still had school the next day, and being a single mom, you know, being a legal widow, that translates to me being a single mom. So then from Denton, Texas, back to White Settlement, Texas, back to Fort Worth, Texas, and then back to Carrollton, Texas, to get my son taken care of so that way he could get ready for his next day of school while I took care of everything else. And in that time frame of November in the year of 2009, that would be how many months, which those of you listening and watching my official YouTube video, how many months would it be from August 2009 to November 2009, specifically in regards of my scuba dive, where I landed at the bottom of the ocean in reference to the USS General Hoyt S. Vandenberg. Those of you who can answer that, you know that length of time. And so, in that reference, congratulations to the new female commander of the United States Coast Guard. I actually looked up what the basic training is for the Coast Guard, and it is so interesting. It happens out of the coastline from New Jersey, in comparison to wherever the Navy goes. For their basic training, if I remember correctly, they go to a lake area compared to the Atlantic area of the ocean. And then I'm not certain where the Marine Corps goes to basic training, although I'm fairly certain it might be either the West Coast area or it might be in below the Mason-Dixon line as to basic training, which would translate to, as far as the Atlantic area of the coastline, such simple water in comparison to the coastline of New Jersey. And so in that reference, I'm going to guesstimate the coasties very much understand the difference as to my childhood growing up, as to each and every individual, whether they signed the dotted line and went to basic training and, pardon my pun, washed out, or they graduated basic training from the coasties before they went on to whichever version of an AIT, which in turn translates to any aspect regarding the Marine Corps and or the Navy and or any type of special forces differences, because obviously the Coast Guard having basic training in the state of New Jersey, they could tell you Cape May is south from where I grew up going to the beach. And the further north you go in the Atlantic area of the ocean, first and foremost, it's kind of a smidgen colder. It can be very frigid cold. You can actually see what are actually called ice caps because of the actual ice that is in that. So in southern areas below the Mason-Dixon line, when you see that white foam that is called an ice cap, that's foam. When you're in the north above the Mason-Dixon line in certain months and you hear the term ice cap, that translates to there's actual ice that forms that white coloration on those waves or in those waves. And so, in that reference to the year of December, well, the year of 2020, in the month of December, and having gone to the Kitty Hawk Outer Banks area during the Bethlehem Star, well, there's, for those who know anything in regards of the current, during different astrological situations such as the full moon and the new moon, for those who are law enforcement on land, that full moon and new moon regarding upticks, well, that's the strength in certain references to undertows and rip currents in comparison. So just think of how much stronger the oceanic waters were when I went during the Bethlehem Star in the year of 2020 in the month of December. regarding that. And then, not only with that, you have the additional frigid cold, because during that time frame, because of those astrological alignments, translates to a different current stream. So then in the year of 2001, and then 2002, or 2021, to the year 2022, I have a lot of thoughts going at this particular point in time as to what I'm going to work on, so I do apologize. I know some people think that that's a Freudian slip in certain references in comparison to myself because of how fast my thoughts actually do go. So in regards of the year of 2021, in reference to having gone out to the Virginia Beach area, and 2022, as well as a few other areas, obviously that's colder water. So in February of 2022, when I had completed the Facebook Live video as to when I went swimming, and then I came back to shore, and then obviously I've done a few videos since then and completed some updates, which includes posting in regards of, now I know I had a dealer license plate in comparison to, because of the time frame. So just for that clarification, as a just in case, to pay attention to detail. So, those ice caps in reference to Long Island area, out at that Washington, Montagu, I can't remember the actual pronunciation, lighthouse, where there is a U.S. Coast Guard station. That was actual ice in that water. Go take a look at those Instagram pictures. You can find that on my website, www.susanmeeling.com, which is then the same as to www.ladydorybell.com. So just think, when I went to Hither's Beach, those pieces of ice in the water at the exact same time in that type of occurrence. The month of February this year of 2022. So while there might be certain aspects that some might have issues with in reference to my Medal of Honor art project, well, just think, I'm doing more work in other factors, so there's that to be in a possibility of some appreciation, possibly. I wouldn't actually know, since throughout this time, from the beginning of my Medal of Honor art project through this year of 2022, there's not anybody who specifically asked me in person, face-to-face in person, in regards of quite a few factors. I've gone through that in regards of my website, www.susanmeeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. In my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, though in addition to that, there's the Modern Day book, which is in my book section on my website. So, I've been working quite a bit, and while I was capable to show some of my pieces off when I was in the state of Texas, which I'm appreciative to have been capable to do, there are those factors as to the reality that I wasn't ever asked. I actually did the asking in comparison. So while there has been the capacity for people to actually just ask me on my website, there's a to contact form, there's a few different informational aspects to that direct portion. And so in comparison though, I haven't had that in any point in time from the year, granted I began in the year 2014, though I published the first completed pieces that I had created in the year 2015. Now, when I went through confirmation class, those people that were in the youth group decided to go and do photography. Now, when it comes to my Medal of Honor art project, I didn't allow that. See, it's not something that's considered freedom of the press. It's not something considered freedom of speech because of the fact that I am an ordained reverend. So it is my constitutional aspects as to my privacy in those regards. And so there was 2 individuals that I had specifically informed that if there was the interest, there was the mandatory discussions with me as to how that actually had to go. It was not up for debate. It was not up for other people to think about. There was only one person, similarly to my scuba diving and my modeling and my books and etc., to just ask. And that one person would be myself. Now, in regards of finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining in regards of my fact books in the genre of compared to my fiction books, because when having written and compiled and all those factors, I have been capable to distinguish the difference on purpose. Now, in regards to finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining, not in any portion of those books is there any request for any assistance regarding my Medal of Honor art project, nor my trips. So while some people might wish in certain regards to that hypothetical, in writing, in those books, that was not put there on purpose. So, Uvalde, Texas last week in May of 2022 had certain situations that I had discussed with people in person, face-to-face in person, regarding the situations in reference to my daughter at McCoy Elementary School, as to more specifically after the Fort Worth Zoo situation, Brooke Army Medical Center in the year of 2012, as well as in regards to the emergency room area, and then the NICS unit in that same year. I explained these situations of literally not the exact same, and yet the reality of. So for those who need that reminder, my daughter had an issue at school, at Thousand Oaks Elementary School. And I, once again, had been called in because I'm the one and only to do so. And so I went in and met with the principal and the guidance counselor as to what had occurred and how she had almost caused a collision where she would have been hit, but there was a teacher in the parking lot. There was a pregnant teacher who fell on her stomach, and whatever emergency room visit there, and so on and so forth. So of course I knew I had to take my daughter back in for another mental health evaluation because of the situations, and in turn additionally make sure that my son was okay because of the reality of being a responsible parent. So as I was cooking dinner, because it was a knowledge that that was going to be the last time I would be capable to cook dinner for my son, my daughter, and I as a family together for that point in time, not realizing the situations to that particular level of. While I was in the kitchen at the stove, my son was thrown into one of the glass and concrete end tables. So I turned off the stove, went over, saw the situation, got the pieces of glass out of my son's back so that way he didn't have to deal with that, got him cleaned up so that way I could take him and his sister to the emergency room, you know, on my own, because that would require, if I had someone in my life, in person, face-to-face in person, in comparison to needless surveillance, because that doesn't do anything to actually assist me in any capacity at all whatsoever. Realistically, anybody who wants to try to wish otherwise, you stood by and did nothing. And that's the facts to Texas. So in this particular reference, I cleaned up my son, got him and his sister ready, on my own, because why would it ever be assistive to me to actually have anybody in my life that actually would be assistive in comparison to the needless garbage that I once knew in person, face-to-face in person. My personal opinion, though each individual would be capable to have their clarifications and verifications to themselves, which since my biological mother, biological father were needlessly involved with quite a few things, there are those facts. And so I took my son and my daughter to the emergency room at Fort Sam Houston, checked my son and my daughter in, did what I could as far as the lacerations to my son because of what had occurred. And then a door opened and my daughter ran through, and I had to chase my daughter while telling my son to keep up the pace as I kept my eye on him while keeping an eye on my daughter. And anybody who's ever been in any type of a government installation, you know how the hallways are. And so I had to turn as quickly as I could to go keep up with. And then because I look as I physically do, and I was on Fort Sam Houston, then, of course, a group of soldiers seeing me, and almost equivalent of a Scooby-Doo cartoon, I was told to halt, and then I had to, in addition to, I had to keep up with my daughter while keeping slow enough for my son, and then, in addition, explaining to the various soldier groups each and every time, because of the way the hallways are. And then code was called and the doors were locked down. And then when my daughter got to the area of the ambulance exit, thankfully the doors were locked because the ambulance was backing in. And if the doors were unlocked, she would have gone out and been hit by the ambulance. So then the group of soldiers and I went and jumped on top of my daughter. I got up out of the way. I picked my son up out of the group. And then one of the soldiers, having been an MP, had been disarmed. And so I pushed my son behind the counter to then jump on top of my daughter, who was holding the firearm correctly. And so with the barrel in my gut, unlike the individuals in Uvalde, Texas, I jumped on top of the child for this particular reference. I know in Uvalde it was an adult. That is what it is. So I jumped on top of my daughter, and I didn't want to, but had to because of all the lives, and then disarmed my daughter and handed the pistol behind me while holding the barrel of the firearm, on a military installation, because, there's this stuff that I was already dealing with. And so they took the pistol as far as that was concerned. Soldiers came and grabbed my daughter. I went to go check on my son as far as that was concerned. And those other situations went the way they did. People in the city of San Antonio were informed of this, and not one individual did anything that was worthwhile. Because there's not one individual who actually ever asked me what would be required. So then there was the Child Protective Services situation yet again because of the insurance company and not enough time and so on and so forth as far as those particular factors at Laurel Ridge off of 281 and 1604 and so on and so forth, because what would actually be beneficial in comparison to adding needless problems in the hypothetical as to my biological mother and biological father, because you can refer to my childhood and my teenage years in those particular references as to those hypotheticals and or any of their individuals that they decided to associate themselves with. And again, I didn't ever allow my son or my daughter to ever meet just anybody. I actually have standards, and those minimum standards as to what I set in comparison they didn't have permission, again, me being the one and only sponsor, and it being my insurance, not my dead ex-husband's, because that would be a mistake if my ex-in-laws and or my biological mother and or biological father and or biological sister were ever ignorant enough to be stupid to think that that would be how it went through in comparison to the reality. And so then there's those particular situations, because if they thought that that was the way it went, and you know, the reference to how he graduated basic training and how their ignorance, probably thinking that wrongly as to the dependent, he was the dependent. I have always been the sponsor. That's the facts. And so in those references, any deals he may have made are null and void because they weren't ever allowed to be made to begin with. Ever. Not with anybody else regarding my son, my daughter, and I, because of the facts of my sponsorship the whole time, hidden in plain sight. So, in those hypotheticals as to other people's wishful thinking, as to those factors of, no, I've always been myself. Always have. And so, in regards of how those people were as to my childhood and my teenage years, which Prudential Insurance, as to whatever HMO or what have you, as to the PPO, I don't know, regarding those factors would be capable to reference that in conjunction to Asher Holmes Elementary School in the years of 1992 into 1993. And so, in conjunction to that, so then there's in the NICS unit in San Antonio, I don't remember where that location was in comparison. And so at that location, the San Antonio police officers that I had warned about this, similarly to all those people throughout all the different areas, not just online, though also in person, face-to-face in person, these people that didn't pay any attention to that, you have this Uvalde, Texas situation. And so while I had made multiple attempts, the local police officers, they didn't want to believe either until my daughter went to go retrieve one of their firearms from the older and slower one in comparison, and that went the way that did. And so I had listened to the news today, the 1st of June, 2022, and there was a bill that has been passed where the situations regarding reporting to schools in California have a different viewpoint. And so, brace yourselves, because that's been a warning I have given to people online, as well as in person, face-to-face in person, officially since the year of 2009. So whether it's through my original Facebook account in comparison to my original Facebook modeling account, which are two different ones. By the way, congratulations, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, as to not only the renaming of your business, though also I'm going to guesstimate some of those coding works that have been going on. I hope that they have been running smoothly as to some of those aspects. I had made a few recommendations in my journal blog, The Ornery PSA, and maybe that space had been really freed up. So hopefully that works out. I do hope that it has, but congratulations on the renaming for that. And the other work that's been going on, I do hope it goes well. So then there's these other situations as to how that's been a knowledge. Now, yes, the secondary account as to L as in lady with a dot or a period dot, D as in Dory with another period dot, and then Bell with an E at the end, regarding my current Facebook account, though you can go to my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com, and you're capable to look through my website to get those social media aspects in those references for those clarifications. Now, if in the references regarding my Medal of Honor art project, which again, that was not ever asked about in writing in my books. Now, yes, I made a post on Facebook one time for one situation and one situation only. There's only one. Wasn't in any other capacity. That was not a free-for-all. That was not an invitation for anything else. It was literally for one situation. I do appreciate Mike Hershey's time in that particular reference. However, that is one situation. Now, while I wouldn't be surprised as to how certain situations of needless drama occurred in the state of Texas as to the time frame around the year 2009 into 2010 and 2011 and 2012 before 2013 and that Stoney LaRue concert at the Cowboys Dance Hall in San Antonio, though now known as Military City, USA, Texas. And then how the end portion at Washington State in the year 2013, as there is the drive, because I didn't fly, obviously, with my son after the San Antonio family court situation, which I had made multiple attempts. I had even, just no different than regards to UBH Denton. Again, my pattern of behavior when my daughter was put into one hospital, I had attended as often as I could. I even drove as far as I did. At the second hospital regarding not the acute care facility, the residential treatment facility near Austin, Texas, which is irony regarding my biological sister and the Miller family being nearby as to those needless problems regarding that abomination of a wedding, in my opinion. Nonetheless, I moved to the area with my son because it was best. Because being a single mom, I'm not just gonna go do, whatever might be assumed. I know how I physically look. I know the assumptions and hypothetical aspects as to those people regarding my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister. I promise you, I'm far more responsible than all three of them combined with my ex-in-laws as far as my responsibility capabilities. So, in that particular reference, I had moved so that way I could take care of both my son and my daughter as best as I possibly could. And so then when she was put into, I can't remember which one it is, but it's off of I-35 regarding one of the acute care facilities. Then after she was taken in regards of out to Little Rock, Arkansas, because of Pinnacle Point being one of the only hospitals that would accept her because of the situations at that particular point in time, then I had traveled out to those areas after having moved back to the DFW area in the Irving location to go drive back and forth every 2 weeks, meeting with Dr. Angela Brown in comparison to Dr. I can't remember her first name, Jackson, in the Austin area, and back as far as those particular situations. And then after a few needless problems regarding Patrick, I moved back to the city of San Antonio, not to be near my biological mother, nor to be near my biological father at all, because of the knowledge of Laurel Ridge nearby. That was the only reason. While they might have wished that that was a victory for them, no. No, they were not in my thoughts at all in regards of that. So, in those references as to those particular factors, because of knowing that that residential treatment center had been there. And so I knew the medical situation where if there was another problem in regards to the school, my daughter was taken care of on the spot. And in comparison to having to move again, I was right there without any hesitation. Unlike civilian recreational scuba divers regarding any assistance that would actually have been beneficial to me for my work. Now, if in regards of what President of the United States of America 46, which also is Vice President of the United States of America 46, Joe Biden, in regards to the time frame differences, having brought up the female factor, again, congratulations in regards to the new commanding officer of the Coast Guard for the United States of America, who's a female in that reference. He had said something about where children shouldn't be considered a problem. So if in the civilian recreational lazy scuba diving sector, such as those two schools, regarding international and or the other scuba school, because of being a mom and thinking that that would be smarter in comparison, well, I'm going to guesstimate if in regards of thinking incorrectly because of speaking with my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister and or my ex-in-laws and or anybody that may have known me for whatever length of time, whatever minimum length of time it may have been. Well, in comparison, if there was the assumption that you could just show up and or call me and, oh, well, now that, you know, that, because it's not the first time that a female being a single mom has ever dealt with those types of needless problems regarding males who have no capacity of actual responsibility to needlessly cause problems and think they just come in and be something special other than a different version of special, in my opinion. And so in that capacity of, to that comparison of being a responsible mom, comparison to the assumptions because I look as I do, well, as 46 had said, where it will be a time where moms don't have to worry about that. So obviously the Coast Guard for the United States of America, unlike the Marine Corps and unlike the Navy, wouldn't have any idea as to the actual work it would take to land at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. In regards of where I actually landed in comparison to Jeff Waters, because that was towards the end of that particular scuba dive, and that was, well, it was as it was compared to, you know, myself. And the facts as to the other individual who caught a poofy fish and was allowed to live, and all of them actually in regards of that particular dive. So in my book series, the 3-volume book series, which you can go to my book section on my website, www.susanmeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. There's the situation regarding what I described as to the Vandenberg when I had worked towards surfacing, as to all those other scuba divers and boats in the water. That applies in addition to the Gulf of Mexico, obviously. I didn't think I'd have to add that, however, just in case I had to. That's fine. However, in regards of my Medal of Honor art project, trips and artwork, well, you know, what would that similarity be to landing at the bottom of the ocean when going to the USS General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, to that kind of connected, though attached aspects, you know, after having landed at the bottom and surfaced to the area of the Vandenberg. So, you know, Coast Guard for the United States of America would be the only group, as far as the armed forces of the United States of America, that would know in a larger capacity as to the age range in the year 2009 compared to the time frame when it was used, whether in regards to apparently a movie as well as having been in other areas of the world. And so the last time it was used was sometime around the 1970s, maybe 1960s. So those different soldiers or whatever branch or division compared to, and yes, you have the Nimitz that's out in the naval shipyard off of the coastline of Washington State. However, individuals, whatever amount of time they had been in the Coast Guard for the United States of America in the year 2009, since they towed it out, would have that direct knowledge, as well as I think it's the National Parks and Wildlife, if I recall. And so in comparison to the Navy individuals and or the Marine Corps individuals, obviously the Air Force, though I know there's some special forces types and then the Army, same thing. The Coast Guard would be the only group that would ever have the knowledge from where I was born and raised as to those particular waters, more specifically than even certain individuals. Because remember, I was invited to attend Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment. And so, in that reference, additionally, so then there's the facts as to I haven't seen the New York City coast area as well as the New York City evening skyline from the area of New Jersey. Now the coast area in regards to Long Island, I acknowledge I didn't make it out to Staten Island, though I did go to Long Island, which those who know. And so, as far as the waters, as far as that's concerned, and so the evening coastline in reference to February of 2022, which is this year. And so individuals, unlike any other branch or division of the United States of America's armed forces, yes, on the 11th of September in 2001, the Pentagon on the Army side was hit. However, is there something that you, in possibility regarding listening and or watching to my official YouTube video, could think of as to the distance between the Pentagon to New York City as to the World Trade Center and World Trade Center Plaza? Now, I have described in minimal ways that I would guesstimate the smoke clouds would be kind of from both areas and the situations regarding the state of New Jersey. Well, there's only one branch. Doesn't matter what their basic training or AIT, it's only in one spot. Now, yes, there's West Point that would have a different viewpoint compared to New Jersey. Now, there are those who have attended West Point that came from New Jersey. However, during basic training, which is only 8 weeks long, which isn't that an irony? I published 8 books the first go round from 2014 to 2016. Isn't that a little coinky dink that I didn't even realize until today, the 1st of June, 2022. Nonetheless, in that particular reference, that is a smidgen of a coinky dink. Maybe get it for that cape aspect. There's something that some can see as a little bit of a coinky dink, possibly So yes, I've been doing everything I possibly can to maintain and sustain, but yet again, similarly to even before the year 2009, I haven't had the luxury that other people have had. So where other people, such as whichever scuba dive shop, they've had people assist them in those capacities. They've had those situations of. Similarly, in regards to even when I volunteered at 9 Lives Books, they've had that capacity in comparison. And so then there's all these other factors and these other references. And yes, I obviously did a lot of volunteering in reference to Washington State and Oregon State. And in regards of my Medal of Honor Art Project artwork, that's my charity. And I listened to Gutfeld, I think it was Gutfeld who said this, or Greg Gutfeld. He had said something, or it might have been Jesse Waters, I can't remember which one it was, had brought up, or it might have been Tucker Carlson, one of the Fox News guys, and actually referring to guys in the male biological factors. I believe one of them said something about how the Clinton Foundation, you know, the actual, how it's supposed to be charity, though in comparison where the finances are in those references comparatively. So yes, I've been capable to do what I can in the small little ways that I can. And you know, I've worked really diligently to do the best I could on my own in references of. And since the situations, because of my Medal of Honor Art Project trip in the year 2018, and then the situations after that in comparison, and all of the stuff that I needed to take care of once 2019 occurred, unlike other people, such as those with like that Clinton Foundation type of aspect, compared to myself, you know, as to what would actually be beneficial for me, as to my work and what I've been doing in the comparison, you know, especially with as many books as I authored that were not in regards of 100% profit or 80% profits donation. Because in reference to the first 3 books regarding the paroxysm of the lotus, that was only 50% in comparison. So if in the assumptions other people didn't pay attention to that because they would think in their thoughts, wishing, compared to the reality, there are those factors as to my knowledge, as to what I was doing because of my work, because I paid attention to the Enron situation in regards to all that IRS stuff that occurred. I didn't want to deal with that. As far as what I was reading in the newspaper, I wanted to prevent myself from any of those problems. And so, you know, if anybody actually paid attention to the first books, as far as that was concerned, compared to assuming they ever knew anything, then in regards of the Curious Children's book series, although I guess it depends, you know, if you listen to that Toys R Us commercial too many times. And so it was in reference to actual children in comparison to toddler minds. Then again, on Fox News, I can't remember what year, I think it was 2017, Miss Dana Perino had reported something about toddler time in colleges. And you know, I wonder in regards of. However, yes, that was 50% as well. And then fail-safe, no, that was not any donation whatsoever. I have these things called mission statements. And if you actually paid attention to those details, I knew the numbers. And so because of, yes, I acknowledge I went from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to 2nd grade math. Okay, Well, I knew that in reference to finding a silver lining and finding the silver lining, those aspects were more broad and assistive to others in comparison to the other book series that had some donations for the first 2 books as well as the first 3 books in comparison for those series, because the rest of the books are not that way. I, again, knew what I was doing for my own work, for my own profit, to be capable to do as I needed for what I'm working on in comparison. And I am a biological female, so, you know, I've brought up those needless problems in regards of those feminazi types that I do everything to not have anything to do with. Similarly to those sexist machismo types that think a female actually needs someone, but in order to do so, I have a meme that I posted about that in regards of, well, a real man won't let her do, yeah, you actually have to be in person, face to face, in person, and actually in a relationship in comparison to wishing to think that, because then there's that MK Ultra issue as to how you don't have that permission or that right, because a real man would actually be a real man in person, face to face, in person. Do you need a Pinocchio reference for that because of those factors instead? Or is it that lack of common sense regarding certain types of individuals as to those wishful thinking because of that problem from that hypothetical aspect as to my biological mother and or my biological father and or my biological sister and or my ex-in-laws and or any ex relationship in a prior time frame of whether acquaintance and or friendship or someone who I had dated at some point in time, having that bitter sensation regarding those factors as to any hypothetical situations and or anybody I once knew, because I didn't ever ask for that on purpose, because it's even in the books similarly too, where I don't ask for the assistance regarding my finances at all. And what I did bring up as to what was not allowed as to my dead ex-husband when he was alive, as to how it was not allowed because I'm the one and only sponsor. So my dead ex-husband when he was alive was not legally allowed to make anything as far as any deals with anybody about me, nor about my son, nor about my daughter at all. So, in regards of those types that would wish off in the distance that would be acceptable in comparison, especially in regards of that civilian, recreational, lazy type of scuba diver way, no. Unlike some people, I actually require as a mandatory in-person, face-to-face, in-person to actually be in a relationship in comparison regarding those romantic dating type of aspects of, whether in regards of a prior what have you that might have the possibility, which I don't know, however, or the possibility of a new one instead of individuals that would ever be ignorant enough to ever think that that would be a preference because of the assumptions as to social media being that way regarding certain types, such as those lazy civilian recreational scuba divers that didn't actually do anything regarding my training for my work, because as I explained to them before I ever met them, I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I grew up going out to the shoreline all the time. And while my biological mother and biological father and biological sister would not know about Sunny, Sonia, Joe, Jose, and Nora when we went out to the shoreline in comparison to Marlboro Recreational Camp, that common sense, as far as that's concerned, stereotypical, I'm going to guesstimate as to this length of time of those needless problems where I didn't ever ask them on purpose. So when I sent those books, that was not an invitation to them. It was literally, there is a meme that I posted on my Facebook account with Rihanna. That was my meme for them. in a very direct, without any aspect of misinterpretation for the clarification. That specific Mimi, for those who know what I'm talking about regarding my original Facebook account, the one with Rihanna that's got her hair done and stuff like that, with shorts on and a tank top, and she's all New Jersey type of attitude. Yeah, no, it was about the time that I sent the books to my biological mother and biological father and biological sister. That, unlike what some other people might possibly have misunderstood regarding what's supposed to be the consenting adult lifestyle, there's no misinterpreting that. That specifically at the time of. So that particular Mimi thing there, that was literally in handwriting. This, Mike, or nah, this is what your wife caused as far as me to take care of, Susan. Bye. Don't annoy me. Do not bother. If you are going to, you better ask with etiquette and respect in comparison to the needless problems that I dealt with throughout my childhood and my teenage years and my biological adult years, because there has not been one point in time where I have ever had any appreciation regarding my personal work in comparison to the amount of constant needless battles regarding those people and those types of people. As per the proof. And so, while there might be the wishful thinking, because similarly to how veterans who have actually done real work in comparison to the ones that want to be debriefed, that request, well, can't you put it in a softer tone of voice? You know, toddler time, in comparison to, no, this is how this went. And then anytime the psychologist usually is like, well, you should really use these words. And every time a guy who's actually handled stuff that has to fluffify it in comparison to these fluffy bunny, whiny titty baby, temper tantrum throwing toddler little whatevers, that is the reason why you got so many problems. Because each and every person who didn't actually ever do anything, especially in regards of certain civilian sector types, and or certain types of what have you, oh, you need to use prettier words because, or your tone of voice is so, just you're so loud, and, you know, in comparison to just accepting the fact that the details are the details. There's no fluffifying certain things. So for example, in comparison to what I handled, and I'm a biological female, that was the year 2012, regarding Fort Sam Houston, compared to Texas in what year? Now, I did read on Twitter that there is a female, I think her name is Brooke, she had made attempts in regards of CNN to report on a few school shootings, one being in Washington State where there were 14. Well, this is a pattern regarding several factors. So these fringe news aspects where these situations have been brought forward, you wonder why the politics are as they are in the overall sector. Well, similarly to pop culture. In my opinion, when you do certain things certain ways in comparison to bringing this stuff forward where it can actually be discussed, if I remember correctly from what I read, I acknowledge it was on a Twitter posting that was done. I think she said it was 2014. So if that's in 2014, in comparison, you also got this in 2012 because of these other situations that have been going on. Well, this is obviously a fact that's been happening well before Columbine in the year of 1998 or 1999. Because you wouldn't have police substations in schools such as New York City, such as Pittsburgh, such as Philadelphia, such as different areas in Chicago, but also along California. You've had this. Detroit has had this for more decades than the time frame regarding this year in 2022. So when did prescriptions as to so-called antidepressants in comparison to actually dealing with the genuine situations, because of all those types that have wanted to fluffify the reality of, I'm going to guesstimate this probably has to do with the time frame between World War II through to even past Desert Storm and Desert Shield, because of the situations as to the Korean War coverage as well as the Vietnam War coverage, as to the factors of, and in comparison to, yes, World War II brought up all these different situations and all these factors. What were the situations during the time frame of the Korean War as well as the Vietnam War where, okay, fine, there were the factors of how it went, but what went correct? Because even in football, hockey, of any sport, baseball, even golf, that is in the professional capacity, you have that review as to how that went. And yes, whatever occurred regarding how Korea and Vietnam and Desert Shield and Desert Storm went, it doesn't change the fact that obviously individuals were awarded different medals and ribbons, which translates to, okay, you actually have to acknowledge, because even in World War II there were losses. In World War I there were losses. Not just loss of life, there were skirmishes that there weren't. So there were obviously successes at the same time. In order to actually do so, there are a multitude of factors. So in the civilian sector, you have all these great movies. Well, you know what? My favorite of the current time frame, I dealt with what I dealt with just to see this movie. And the very few that I have ever seen a movie with know exactly how painful it was for me when I had been in the theater with them at the time, in regards of 2010 for that year. 2000, whatever year it was regarding the lone survivor. I think it was the individual, I think it's called Lone Survivor. And I think he's living in the Houston, Texas area. You see every portion of. So I'm sure you can refer, yes, in Pearl Harbor in comparison to Tora. You have certain factors that are shown. And yes, the successes is to the knowledge of. And there is the success that he got, Marcus Luttrell got to survive. But there's the acknowledgement of the reality. So if in regards to the Korean War and or the Vietnam War, it was, oh, well, there's so many and all this sort of in comparison. Yeah, that's part of it. But there's also plenty of successes. And that's a massive success, despite the situations. And so I dealt with what I dealt with just to see that movie, because I needed to see that movie. I needed to hear and all that sort of stuff. I dealt with the pain levels the way they went. And it is as it is. However, that is the facts. So while, yes, you have Pearl Harbor and, oh, there's the semi-ish, love story-ish. And then you have other, whatever, I don't know, whatever references. Yeah, it's inspirational in regards of. And yet, there are also the other factors as to the reality of. Arlington National Cemetery is however many acres. And you can find individuals as far as however long they lived their lives, whether it was during the wartime or after. You don't even have to go all the way to Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia to know that. You can go to your local state area VFW or VFD Veteran Cemetery, and or you can go to a Washington Soldier Home. Because a Washington Soldier Home, for those who don't know, is in reference to individuals who don't have family members that can go and do certain things for them to remember their names and remember their work, whatever they earned. And while some may or may not know, the ones who don't know, that haven't had that particular factor in comparison, that's kind of extremely important to remember. Because it's not just the names that are known as far as different individuals regarding my Medal of Honor art project artwork. So in the, I can't remember what year it was, President of the United States of America, 43, George W. Bush, had said something, and it was different in comparison, but no child left behind. Well, I grew up attending Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, and at Old Tenet Presbyterian Church, there's a square mile cemetery. And General George Washington's private office is behind the church. Battle of Monmouth was off to the side in the back area along the grounds. And when I heard that, there was a multitude of thoughts similarly to any other aspect when it comes to how I personally think about things. And so as I paid attention, and I can't remember what year he had said it, can't remember what year his administration had discussed other things, and yes, in part regarding what additionally was being dealt with as to my daughter and my son and I, not just in regards of the school, although I guess I could make an ironic aspect, or that's not the correct words. I can make a correlation to the metaphor of that statement regarding 43, George W. Bush and his administration, including Vice President Dick Cheney, as to no child left behind. And so while the civilian recreational scuba divers made whatever choices as to, well, realistically, they can judge for themselves as to whether or not they left behind certain factors in comparison to doing the actual correct choices. In that conjunction, especially since the majority of them were so proud to vote for President of the United States of America, 44, Barack Obama, because those of you who know how that went in the year 2008, remember, I'm a Republican, and those who knew me in person, face-to-face in person, whether it was before or after that time, in scuba diving, where I earned my 26 scuba diving certifications, I informed them that I'm a Republican. I informed them that no, I didn't vote for 44. I knew he was going to become president. However, I voted for Senator John McCain and Governor Sarah Palin. I was just scuba diving as an unattached female in scuba in the year 2009. That's all. So, you know, I know that some might have whatever opinion, so there's the fact that I really enjoy, and I stood up to listen to Eminem on a military installation. Wanted to listen to Eminem. And you know, being a 17-year-old, not graduate of basic training, head injury, you know, however long I was in a coma, that I woke up with a subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. I had Christina Aguilera too, I like that. Who may have thought that that was a smidgen ornery. Well, let me step it up a notch. You know, I also enjoy country music, by the way. Yeah, I like Garth Brooks and Tim McGraw. I don't really like the Chris Cagle thing, but I like Garth Brooks. I also like Reba McEntire, the Judds. So let's see, Faith Hill, Johnny Cash, as well as Dolly Parton, and what's some of the. So then, of course, there's Carrie Underwood, Miranda Lambert, Kelly Pickler. There's a few other. Oh, Brad Paisley. Oh, I do like Brad Paisley, which is a perfect tie-in in regards of how some people view online in comparison. Because you need to be capable to distinguish the difference online as to what website you're on and the aspects up for that knowledge. So in regards of Facebook, it's supposed to, from what I gather, supposed to be where you socialize in truth. If you choose to be a part of certain groups, in those groups and in those groups only, or whatever your aspects are. In comparison. So you have that similarly in real life. So if you attend certain what have yous, you know what the overall aspects are, but you know that some people might be new in comparison. Or they might be around for a while, but they have certain things that in order to whatever as to comfort level. You know that some people might have whatever background in comparison, so on and so forth. And that's just in regards of Facebook. Well, most probably online in that particular reference. So that Brad Paisley song is fairly apropos in regards of, you know, and it's kind of irony. I could almost make a joke regards of certain parental situations and the hypothetical. For those from St. John Vianney High School who remember a couple drawings I had, so then there's that reference. Though in person, face-to-face in person, because anybody from St. John Vianney High School who went up to different areas in New York City and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, different areas of the tri-state area. Hi. Yeah, in comparison to what may have been thought. And so, yeah, and then my biological mother can think of certain other factors, although, such as a drawing when I was in kindergarten, and so chesty, and so, don't you think that she might need some clothes because she might get cold? In comparison to, why are they all so chesty? It's almost like a different type of, which one? It's almost like a little bit of the Mom and Nanny Fine-ish. To it Maxwell. So I really liked Nanny Fine as far as I was concerned. I thought she was great. I didn't actually get to see what she looked as until, I don't know what year it was. I think it was like 2000, I think it was 2020. There was some reunion show or something like that. It's, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that's what she looked as. I remember that type of hairstyle. I do. Because when I didn't really watch. I just listened because I was in 5th grade. So I had no idea what she actually, or any of them actually looked as. Had no idea. Same thing for like Living Signal, that Maxine Waters. I think that was her name. I think so. She's her. Ooh. Her and whatever the guy's name, as far as their legal talk and stuff, I was like, yes, mix that with Matlock. That's like the best legal person, something or another. As far as that type. Again, I have no idea what they physically look as. Although I now know what Queen Latifah looks as. So that's recent. That's what happens when you're in 5th grade and you have mono Epstein Barr bronchitis, Lyme disease, and the flu all at the same time. So, in comparison to Sailor Moon, which is a cartoon, comparatively, obviously. So yeah, although you can get certain costumes or whatever in a different sort of capacity, which is obviously different in circumstances. So yeah, then there's that in regards of my scuba diving that, could have just asked. Literally one person asked. So many different things, just one person. And so I know that E = MC squared, also known as Elon Musk, has brought up something about needing to know what to ask, I guess it depends on. It's pretty simple. In comparison, you just kind of, there's really only one way to do that, and you just go do it. It's pretty simple, and so, he would know, he did this stuff with the Boring Company, he just did it. And he did this stuff with Tesla, and he just did it. And he did this stuff with SpaceX, he just went and did it. I'm sure there was more to it, I don't doubt that. Just pointing this out there, You just went and did it. Well, that is as it is. So, yeah. I've been working on a few things here and there. There's a little bit. Not the equivalent of E = MC squared, because I haven't built that. And so then you got, Jeff Bezos or Mr. Bezos regarding, he started up Amazon and did all sorts of other stuff. And I would not be surprised if people that I once knew in person, face to face in person, would have told him otherwise. Because I would know which individuals in the hypothetical of as to how certain ones would be. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had warnings to them from others. I would have been like, you shouldn't do it that way. No. You should ask her, because that would be smarter in comparison. So there was this situation at Steel Creek Country Club, and in comparison, sometimes words are really important. Sometimes, like all the time. Nonetheless, the correct choices of words, they're kind of important here and there. So, inside of a country music dance club during the weekend hours at the evening time frame after 9 or 9:30, or for clarifications, 2100 or 2130 for military time. Some random individual that I didn't recognize, again, I was also dealing with a few things at that point, had asked me if I had my daughter with me. Was that Steel Creek Country Club? I mean, that's kind of... And granted, maybe he worded it differently, however, there was the DJ playing, there were people talking, etc., you know. So if it happened to have been somebody I actually once knew in person, face to face in person, and instead of just being a man, if it was a male, or I should just clarify, you know, the gender neutral whatever. If it was a female or a male, yeah, I'm just walking directly up with etiquette and respect and like common sense. If accurate regarding that, yeah. If was done because of somebody else, instead of just doing it. Common sense. I guess it might be a superpower. Because, you know, I've went directly to in quite a few aspects of. So for example, in 2019, I went to Governor Greg Abbott's office. I didn't get to meet with him, though I was concerned about a few situations. And yes, there was a lot. And that included the situations in reference to, however, I went directly to his office. Ish. I mean, it was the lobby area. But the building up. And so I made the attempts directly in comparison. So I made the attempts just as the same regarding, you know, going directly to Clear Springs Scuba Park, having went directly to International as far as that was concerned. But that was where I was informed that, you know, I didn't have the title of instructor, though that kind of hypothetically shows the lack of responsibility. Because then when you take in consideration, instead of me being biologically the age and the year that I was in the year of 2009, just envision 9 years old. So, you know, in that aspect of, in comparison to the physical because of the reality, you know, anybody I once knew in the year 2009, instead, if they have to visualize differently, I was 9 years old, or 9 years awake from my coma. In regards of Amber, my ex-brother-in-law's second wife's second child, Amber, if she had heard, and she was very intelligent in comparison to her sister, who, when I was pregnant, called me fat. Similarly to my dead ex-husband, you know, when I was pregnant, having called me fat, it is what it is. It took a lot to remain calm. Nonetheless, Amber having heard, and Amber being intelligent as far as the numerical aspects, you know, 2000, so there's a 0 at the end. And then there's 2001, so there's a 1, so it goes from 0 to 1. And then 2002 says 0 to 2. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple as far as that's concerned, though nonetheless, in scuba diving, 2009, wait for my coma. So then there's 2010, 10 years awake from my coma. So then, you know, anybody in any area, whether it's scuba diving and or what's supposed to be the consenting adult lifestyle, well, it was the equivalent of. And so just think as to that, okay, I physically look as I do, that doesn't change the facts of, as far as those intellectual aspects. And so, you know, 2019 and international and that sort of factor of, well, what's the difference between 2009 to 2019 as to what I needlessly dealt with in comparison regarding certain types? Because what does that let you know as to what the actualities were in the year of 2009. Because remember, 2009 is the year after the 2008 election. And remember, my first classes were in February of 2009. When is the inauguration? Think about that, and now remember as to what I dealt with, but actually think about what I genuinely dealt with. Not just in reference to my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, and ex-in-laws that proudly voted for 44, President of the United States of America, Barack Obama. I voted for Senator John McCain and Governor Sarah Palin. Yeah, biologically old enough to. Biologically. So I'm not the only person who is, it's not special needs by technicalities, but it's Americans with disabilities. And so, even before my head injury, when I was a child, I stood up for people who had special needs. So in Asher Homes, I had stood up for individuals who were in, there was one particular female who had been in a wheelchair that actually required a joystick to move the wheelchair. And she had this, I don't know what it was, but it's there was kind of a straw almost. I don't want to say it was a straw, but she was someone I defended being capable to just walk, or her chaperone walk with her, but the wheelchair situation. And that was in New Jersey, for those who, as many know how they are in New Jersey. And so in Illinois, literally 2 weeks, though this happened several times regarding Nick Robinson and Joy Hoover, because I had defended the male who had seen me several times from the earlier portion of 1998 to the actual 1998-1999 year. And I think he was about 6 foot something, lighter brunette hair, and he would push through the common pit area, and he pushed Nick Robinson over one point in time and ran up and wrapped his arms around me before my hair, and oh, hi. And so, the first time it happened in the earlier part of 1998 didn't really bother me, and the people who saw were surprised, and the chaperone had apologized, and I said, it's fine, it's okay, I understand, I understand it. It's just learning certain things, I get it. And so when there was a point in time in 1998 to 1999 school year, and I've already had this police substation guy where he's just like, yeah, another report was made against you. It became a joke between us. What I do now that I didn't know about, and not initially, it took into about the time of 1999. I think it was about January of 1999, and I'm like, so what did I do that I didn't know I did, sir? And he'd pull out his pad of paper. Well, let's see, did you do this? Well, I did this, but not that. Okay, and did you do that? And he just went through a list. There were a few times where he went through several note pieces of paper. It's like, no, I did this, but no, I didn't. No, I wish I did that. That sounds fun. And so became a really big joke between us because of how bad it got because of their issues at Crystal Lake South. I mean, some of the accusations that had arisen, some of them were pretty special. Yes, I don't know where they got some of these ideas from. Although I wouldn't be surprised if there was some pop culture references, because a lot of the stuff they were talking about GATs, and it's like, what? Really? Wow. So, there's the first day as far as wow, okay. Well, I guess I don't know, is that an upgrade, officer, or how does this go? Became that to that level, well, just before the 1999 turn of the year, which, again, this particular individual, he just pushed through. It didn't matter if he saw me, it was as it was. Well, before getting to that, the substation police officer had asked, could you just walk in this hallway between this class and this class? Yeah, why? What's in that hallway? Because it's just a special needs room, and the one that has run up to you a bunch of times, he was telling the other ones about you. Oh, yeah, sure, that's no problem. And he's like, okay, inform me which class it was, so that way it wasn't that big of a deal. And so I'd walk by, and I'd get about 3/4 past the door, and no, don't do that again. And then it is the first time and every time that it's like, hi. And the class had been surprised. And the chaperones, I had a hall pass after that, because I just spoke with the different chaperones and educators as far as a few different situations at the time, because of the way things were in New Jersey for certain regulations. And so it was as it was. Well, that happened a few times. And so but then in reference to when Nick Robinson had started off and popped off with that N-word, it just so happened to be 1 or 2 weeks when, just before that particular one, just and and it was as it was. So I was already a smidgen upset about a different word. And so by the time he had used that other word that started with an N, and the first one started with an R, but like in a different way, because obviously there's different definitions as to, it was as it was. That was, so after that situation, then the substation police officer, if you could just go by real quick again, they just really need, okay, that's fine. It's no big deal. Hi. And so, yeah, that got around the school real quick because of quite a few reasons. And so it was as it was, but yeah, I am as I am. So, but then in regards of 2008 into 2009, I mean, that's the facts of knowing the differences. And so while McCoy Elementary School and Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District, yeah, sure, they might have talked with my biological mother, biological father, and or biological sister, and or my ex-in-laws. They didn't know me. They didn't know anything about that, because that was during school. That wasn't when they were around. They didn't ever see that. My biological sister's classes, in regards to the hallway, when she was in school, compared to where my classes were in 6th grade especially, yeah, nowhere near one another. She wouldn't have ever seen anything, because she wasn't within the vicinity of. Same thing in regards to Crystal Lake South High School. I was in high school. She was, I think, still in elementary school. If they had a regular 7th and 8th grade as to middle school. Otherwise, she would have never seen that, which is part of what she dealt with. Because what she got in trouble for was because of how I was assistive. And she had this feeling that she was too good to assist without certain factors up in comparison. And so it was as it was, and I'm sure there are others that have that viewpoint at some reference levels up. However, it just was as it was and is as it is. So when it comes to situations such as my Medal of Honor art project, yeah, I don't mind certain things, but you actually have to discuss it with me. Because there are factors of, so I know that there are those types that are skeptics. I know that. I've known that. I was born and raised in New Jersey in the 1980s, into the 1990s. I don't know if there's like anybody who's ever heard of any skeptics that come out of the area, the tri-state area of the United States of America. There's a few. There are more than 2. I know that. Groups. So that's just the reality. And so it doesn't change the facts though. And there's still etiquette and respect. So in that particular reference, not changing anything, it is as it is. So hopefully this little kind of weird overall sort of correlation because of the time frame assists to make sense in certain references where other people who once knew me in person, face to face in person, they wouldn't have known that. Old Tenet Presbyterian Church wouldn't have known that at all, whatsoever. Most people in Crystal Lake South High School, it depends on what year and if they paid attention. Asher Holmes Elementary School, only 4th, 5th, and 6th grade may have known about that other than the teachers and the cafeteria and staff. So I've always been myself. It's just whether or not you paid attention. So, thanks for tuning in. Make sure to go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, which is the same as www.ladydorybell.com. Subscribe to my official YouTube channel, like my official YouTube videos, share the links to my official YouTube videos. And if you're going to leave a comment, make sure to have etiquette and respect. And go look throughout my website as the journal blog, Ornery PSA, or my journal blog, the Ornery PSA, as well as the book section in regards of, as well as the areas of my artwork. And so you guys have a good day. Today is the 1st of June, 2022. Have a good one. The 1st of June, 2022. See? Have a great day.